I always thought Amelia and I had the perfect marriage. We've been together for almost 10 years, and everything seemed fine. No, better than fine. We had the same interests. We were building our life together, and I thought she was happy. But lately, things started feeling off. When something just doesn't sit right? Yeah, that's how it felt with her. She started acting distracted, and I could feel her pulling away, declining family dinners, canceling plans with friends, all while working more. At first, I tried to chalk it up to stress or maybe something happening at her job, but the more I noticed, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was going on. The first red flag came when I found this old letter she kept. Nothing dramatic at first, just a few lines about an old friend from her past. Weird, sure, but people hold on to all sorts of stuff, right? But it stuck with me. I remember thinking, who the hell is this guy? She's calling her old friend? And why hadn't I ever heard about him in our decade together? That's when the distance started creeping in. She wasn't the same Amelia anymore. We used to talk, really talk about everything, what we wanted in life, how we'd get there. Now, it's like talking to a brick wall. The late nights at work became more frequent. She'd barely look at me when we were together. And the excuses? God, they just didn't add up. Then came the receipts. Restaurants. Places I knew we'd never been to. Not together anyway. Fancy dinners, way out of the way. I'm sitting here thinking, who the hell is she having dinner with? And I'm not talking fast food. I'm talking white tablecloth, wine by the bottle type places. She'd say it was work, but come on. Who the hell goes to work dinners 4 nights a week? I started digging a little deeper. It's not like I could confront her without proof. So I installed this GPS tracker in her car, slipped some software onto her phone. Don't get me wrong, I felt sick to my stomach doing it. But at this point, I had to know. I needed something. I couldn't just sit around while she went out God knows where with God knows who. That's when I found out about the hotel. Every couple of weeks, she was heading out to this hotel, not even far away, just on the outskirts of town. I'd track her going there, staying for a couple of hours, then heading back home like nothing had happened. Like everything was normal. There were so many little things that started to make sense, like how she'd react when we'd be out with friends, especially when certain topics would come up. One time, we were at dinner with some close friends, and someone brought up old relationships, just as a joke. Amelia froze. Like completely froze. She changed the subject so fast that everyone noticed. It was weird, and I couldn't let it go. It got even worse when I started getting these calls. Anonymous numbers, whispering crap like, you don't know the whole story about your wife, and she's got a double life, man. What the hell? At first, I thought it was some prank, but after everything else, I wasn't so sure. It was starting to feel like my whole life was built on some bullshit fantasy that was falling apart right in front of me. Then came the final nail in the coffin. A chance meeting with one of Amelia's old acquaintances. Someone she'd never mentioned to me. We bumped into this guy at the grocery store of all places. Casual conversation at first, but when he started talking about the past, things didn't add up. He mentioned stuff Amelia never told me. Places she'd been, people she knew, things that completely contradicted what she'd shared with me. It was like I was learning about a stranger, not my wife. By this point, I wasn't even sure if I wanted to know the truth. But I couldn't stop myself. I had to dig deeper. I was about to uncover things that would change everything. Things that would make me question not just my marriage, but everything I thought I knew about the woman I married. It's funny how you think you know someone. I thought I had Amelia figured out. I thought I knew every little thing about her life before we met. Her childhood, her family, even her exes. But after that encounter with her old acquaintance, I knew something was seriously off. And I couldn't let it go. Not after the hotel trips, the sketchy receipts, and those weird anonymous calls. It wasn't just our marriage on the line anymore. It was everything I thought I knew about her. That's when I started digging into her phone. I know it sounds messed up, but I had to. The GPS tracker already told me she was sneaking around to that hotel, but now I needed to know who she was meeting there. So I pulled up her messages. You wouldn't believe what I found. There he was, the old friend. The messages were all coded. like she was trying to cover her tracks. But after reading through enough of them, it became obvious. They talked about meeting up, sharing moments from their past, places they used to go. But here's the kicker. None of it lined up with what Amelia had told me about her past. The stories she'd shared about her life before me? All bullshit. Suddenly, I wasn't just wondering if she was cheating. I was starting to realize that everything the last 10 years of our life together could have been built on lies. The worst part? She didn't just refer to him as some old buddy. No, she called him her old friend, but the way she spoke to him, it was like I was reading some shitty romance novel. They weren't just reconnecting. There was history there, something deep. That's when I knew I couldn't handle this on my own anymore. I wasn't about to confront her without having the full picture. I needed proof, solid, undeniable evidence. So, I did what anyone would do in my situation. I hired a private investigator. The guy I hired, Mike, was a pro. He didn't ask too many questions. He just wanted to know the basics. I gave him all the info, her schedule, the hotel visits, everything. And then I waited. That's when the paranoia really kicked in. Every time Amelia left the house, I wondered if this would be the day I'd find out what the hell was really going on. Every night, she came home late, I found myself staring at her, trying to figure out if she was lying straight to my face. It didn't take Mike long to start sending me updates. And trust me, the shit he uncovered, it rocked me to my core. Turns out, Amelia's old friend wasn't just some dude from her past. He was her ex-husband. Yeah, the same one she told me she left years ago, claiming he was a bad influence and that she wanted nothing to do with him. Well, apparently, that was just another lie in her endless web of bullshit. They'd been in contact for God knows how long, meeting up behind my back like nothing had changed between them. She even traveled to see him when she said she was away for work. I felt sick, but it didn't stop there. Mike sent me photos, pictures of her with him, and not just casual stuff either. We're talking about romantic dinners, hand-holding, kissing in public like they were some star-crossed lovers. Then there were the videos, ones that made it clear they weren't just meeting for drinks. And on top of that, Mike found evidence that she wasn't just seeing her ex. There were other men too, other hotel meetings. It was like every corner I turned, there was more filth waiting for me. I remember sitting at the table with the stack of evidence Mike had given me, just staring at the photos, the videos, all the proof that my wife was a fucking fraud. It's like the floor had been ripped out from under me. I had no idea who I was married to anymore. Was anything she'd ever told me true? The worst part was, I couldn't tell anyone. Not yet. Not until I figured out my next move. But it was eating me alive. My friends, our friends, started noticing something was off. We'd all be hanging out, and they'd make these stupid jokes about relationships and infidelity, not knowing I was living in the middle of it. Amelia was sitting there, laughing along with them, and I'm just gritting my teeth, trying not to explode. There was this one day in particular. We were at a barbecue, and one of my buddies started cracking jokes about how all wives have their secrets. It was meant to be lighthearted, but it hit me like a punch to the gut. Amelia was right there, sipping her drink, pretending like she didn't have a care in the world, like she wasn't sneaking off to hotels with her ex and God knows who else. I wanted to scream at her right then and there, to rip her perfect little facade apart in front of everyone. But I didn't. I played it cool, smiled through the pain. No one knew the truth. Not yet. After that day, things with my friends started to get tense. I didn't want to hang out anymore. Didn't want to be around people who didn't know what was really going on. How could they? I was lying to them just like she was lying to me. And I hated it. Mike kept digging, and the more he found, the angrier I got. I couldn't stop thinking about how I was going to make her pay. But not yet. No, this wasn't the time to blow up. I had to play the long game, just like she had. She thought she was so clever, hiding all these secrets, playing me for a fool. But she had no idea what was coming. After everything I found out, confronting Amelia would have been too easy. I didn't want her just to admit to what she was doing. That would have been letting her off the hook. I needed to hit her where it really hurt. Her career, her reputation, and everything she'd built for herself. The same way she had been slowly tearing apart everything we had, I was going to do the same to her. But I wasn't in a rush. No, I was going to take my time with this. First things first, I needed to get my affairs in order, literally. Divorce was inevitable, and I wasn't about to let her walk away with anything. I contacted a lawyer, a shark, someone who knew how to handle situations like mine. We didn't just talk about splitting assets. We talked strategy. The first thing he told me was to get everything in writing. Emails, messages, photos, videos, anything I could get my hands on that would show the court just how deceitful Amelia had been. It wasn't just about cheating anymore. It was about ruining her in every possible way. Then there was Sophie. Now, I'll be honest, she wasn't part of the plan at first. She was just a colleague, someone I worked with from time to time. Young, attractive, sure, but I hadn't really paid much attention to her before. That all changed when she started flirting with me. Little compliments here and there, lingering looks, and it didn't take long before I realized she was interested. And you know what? After everything Amelia had done, I wasn't about to turn down that kind of attention. I needed a distraction, and Sophie was perfect for that. But more than that, I could use her. Our first few meetings were purely professional, grabbing lunch during work or having coffee in between meetings. But it didn't take long for things to shift. I started looking forward to seeing her. The way she'd laugh at my jokes, the way she'd touch my arm when she talked to me. I knew exactly where this was heading, and I let it happen. It wasn't like I was emotionally involved. I mean, how could I be after what Amelia had done to me? Sophie was just another tool in my plan, and I was going to use her to my advantage. The first time we hooked up, I made sure to record it. Every kiss, every whisper, every little moment, I documented it all. It wasn't about the sex, although I'll admit, it felt good to have someone who actually wanted to be around me. But I wasn't stupid. I knew this was just another weapon in my arsenal. When the time came, I was going to use it all against Amelia. She thought she had secrets? Well, so did I. Meanwhile, I wasn't just sitting around waiting for the perfect moment to drop the bomb. I was already starting to lay the groundwork. Through my connections, I began to spread subtle rumors about Amelia at her workplace. It wasn't hard. People love gossip, especially when it's about someone who's been climbing the corporate ladder as quickly as she had. It started small. Whispers about her personal life, comment about her taking long trips, about how she seemed distracted at work. I didn't even have to do much. People's imaginations took care of the rest. I even started forging a few documents. Nothing crazy, just little things that made it seem like she was mismanaging things at work. I knew a few people in her professional circle who had it out for her anyway. I made sure they had the right information at their disposal. Before long, Amelia's reputation started to take a hit. People were questioning her professionalism, her ability to manage her team, and even her loyalty to the company. All the while, Amelia had no idea what was happening. She still came home, still pretended everything was fine. She was still sneaking off to meet her ex, probably thinking I was too blind or too stupid to notice. But I noticed everything. I controlled everything now, and she had no clue. Things with Sophie continued to develop. At first, I didn't think much of it, but over time, I started to actually enjoy being around her. She was easy to talk to, fun, and completely different from the cold, distant version of Amelia I had to deal with every day. We started spending more time together, after work on weekends. She thought it was becoming something real, and honestly, I was starting to feel that too. But I wasn't about to let my guard down. Not after what had happened with Amelia. I was in control this time. I kept Sophie in the dark about the full extent of what was going on. She didn't know that I was using her as part of my revenge plan. She thought she was just a girl falling for a guy whose marriage was falling apart. And maybe, in some twisted way, that was true. But this wasn't about her. This was about destroying Amelia. As the weeks went by, I could feel things moving toward the inevitable confrontation. Amelia was starting to feel the pressure at work. She'd come home stressed out, complaining about her colleagues being distant, about people questioning her decisions. She couldn't figure out why her career was suddenly on the rocks. And I'd just sit there, nodding along, pretending to be the supportive husband while knowing damn well I was the one pulling the strings behind the scenes. But I wasn't done yet. No, there was more to come. I was going to hit her where it hurt most, and when it all came crashing down, she wouldn't even know what hit her. I wasn't wasting any more time. Amelia had to feel it. Everything I'd been feeling since I discovered her betrayal. It was time for the first blow, the one she wouldn't see coming. I made sure the evidence of her infidelity landed in the hands of exactly the right person, one of her biggest professional rivals. You see, Amelia had clawed her way up in her career, making a few enemies along the way. She liked to play the part of the perfect professional, always smiling and shaking hands. But behind the scenes, she was ruthless. I knew just the person who'd love to see her taken down a peg. It was almost too easy. I dropped some well-timed anonymous hints, shared a few photos that couldn't be explained away, and within days, the rumor mill started spinning. By the time Amelia walked into the big client event, the whispers were already spreading like wildfire. She had no clue, of course. Why would she? As far as she knew, she was still in control, keeping her dirty little secrets safe. That night, the event was packed. Everyone who mattered in her professional circle was there, clients, bosses, and the people who could make or break her career. I was there too, pretending to be the supportive husband, smiling at her side while she schmoozed and laughed with people who were about to turn their backs on her. It was almost poetic, really. I watched from a distance as the whispers reached her. First, it was just a few sideways glances. Then the quiet conversation started. Amelia noticed, of course. She's sharp. She knew something was off, but she couldn't figure out what. I could see the confusion growing on her face as she tried to navigate through the crowd, acting like everything was fine. And then the moment came. One of her colleagues, someone who used to be in her corner, cornered her. They didn't say much, but I could see the way they looked at her. The judgment, the disdain. They knew. And Amelia? She had no idea how they found out. She stood there, stunned, as the realization hit her. The perfect little world she'd built was starting to crack. I could tell she was rattled. She tried to pull me aside at one point, whispering about how weird people were acting, how something felt off. "Do you think someone's spreading rumors?" she asked, her voice shaky. I just shrugged, playing dumb. "I'm sure it's nothing," I said, hiding the smirk tugging at my lips. Meanwhile, things with Sophie were getting complicated. What started as something I used for revenge was starting to shift. We'd been meeting in secret, keeping things under the radar, but I could feel the tension building. It wasn't just about sex anymore, though that was part of it. Sophie was getting emotionally invested, and I could tell she was starting to sense that I wasn't just in this for the fun of it. She'd asked me more than once if I was sure I was ready to move on from Amelia, if this was really what I wanted. I lied, of course, told her what she wanted to hear. "Of course, I'm ready," I'd say, kissing her, knowing full well I was still focused on destroying Amelia. Sophie wasn't stupid, though. She was starting to see the cracks in my story, starting to suspect that I had other motives. But she was in too deep by now. She cared about me, at least she thought she did, and I knew she wasn't going to back out. But back to Amelia. After that event, things went downhill fast. Word had spread, and her professional reputation was taking a hit. Clients were questioning her integrity, colleagues were distancing themselves, and I watched it all play out with a sick sense of satisfaction. I'd set the wheels in motion, and there was no stopping it now. Still, she didn't have a clue that I was behind it all. She started acting paranoid, accusing people at work of talking behind her back, and even coming home and venting to me about it. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was the one pulling the strings, and she was too wrapped up in her own web of lies to see it. I started pushing her, little by little, trying to get her to admit what she'd done. I'd make comments about trust, about loyalty, about how secrets always come out in the end. But every time, she'd deny it, stubborn as hell, refusing to admit what was right in front of her. I'd look her in the eyes and ask, "Are you sure there's nothing you need to tell me?" And every time, she'd look right back and say, "No, of course not." It was infuriating, but also kind of satisfying. She thought she was still in control. She had no idea that the walls were closing in. And Sophie, well, she was starting to catch on. She wasn't dumb. She could feel the distance between us, even though we were still meeting up regularly. She'd ask me, "Are you just using me to get back at your wife?" And I'd always brush it off. But I could see the doubt in her eyes, the way she hesitated before letting things go further. I knew I had to make a choice soon. Either I was going to keep using Sophie as part of my plan, or I'd have to be honest with her. But for now, I was too focused on Amelia's downfall. The real show was just getting started, and I wasn't about to lose control of it. I'd been planning this moment for weeks. Every move I'd made, every piece of evidence I'd collected, it was all leading to this. The day I would expose everything and finally let Amelia know that I wasn't the clueless husband she thought I was. I wanted her to feel the humiliation, to understand the consequences of everything she'd done. And the best part? She had no idea it was coming. The lawyers had already been involved for a while, but this was the day we'd sit down and discuss the divorce terms. But before any paperwork was signed, I had one last trick up my sleeve. I made sure her lawyer would be there too. The guy looked smug, probably thinking he was going to get her a sweet deal. He had no idea the bomb I was about to drop. We sat in the meeting room, Amelia, her lawyer, my lawyer, and me. She was dressed in her usual professional style, confident as ever. But underneath that polished exterior, I could sense she was on edge. Her career had been in free fall for weeks, ever since the rumors about her affair started circulating. She was losing clients, colleagues weren't returning her calls, and her reputation was hanging by a thread. Still, she thought she had control over me, over this divorce. How wrong she was. I slid the folder across the table. Photos, texts, emails, everything that tied her to her ex-husband and the string of other men she'd been sneaking around with. I didn't say anything at first, just watched her face as she opened it and started flipping through the evidence. Her hands started shaking. "Where the hell did you get this?" she hissed, her voice low but full of panic. I leaned back, crossing my arms. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out, Amelia? You've been lying to me for years. You didn't just cheat. You lied about your entire life. And now it's all out in the open." Her lawyer tried to keep his composure, but even he looked rattled. "We can discuss this privately," he said, already scrambling to figure out how they were going to salvage the situation. But I wasn't done. Not yet. "Oh, I'm not interested in keeping this private," I said, my voice steady. "In fact, I think it's time we bring this out into the light. I'm tired of the lies, and I'm tired of playing nice." Amelia's face went pale, and she knew what was coming. The final blow. I had planned a public event. One of those big corporate dinners where all the major players in her professional circle would be present. I'd arranged for the evidence to leak just before the event. By the time she showed up, everyone would know the truth. It went exactly as I expected. When she walked into the room that evening, you could feel the shift in energy. People stared, whispered, and started moving away from her like she had the plague. Amelia, still clueless about the full extent of what was happening, tried to make her usual rounds, smiling and pretending everything was normal. But then the questions started coming. First, it was subtle, small talk about her personal life, questions she couldn't dodge. Then someone, I don't even remember who, came out and said it outright. "So, how's your ex-husband doing? Still meeting up with him on the side?" Amelia's face fell. She tried to keep it together, but it was too late. The room had already turned against her. She stumbled through a half-baked excuse, trying to laugh it off, but nobody was buying it. It was over. She lost it. Right there, in front of everyone, Amelia broke down. She tried to justify herself, blaming me, blaming her job, even blaming the pressure of our marriage. But the more she talked, the worse it got. Nobody believed her anymore. The people who used to hang on her every word, the friends she thought she had, they all turned their backs on her. It was brutal, and I watched it all happen with a sense of cold satisfaction. After the event, things moved fast. The divorce was inevitable, but now I was in control. She knew it. Her lawyer knew it, and even my lawyer had a smug look on his face the whole time we negotiated the terms. Amelia tried to push back, tried to hold on to what little she had left, but I wasn't playing nice anymore. I made sure she lost a significant portion of our assets. All that hard work she'd put into her career, gone. The life we'd built together, shattered. We met again with the lawyers to finalize the terms. It was tense. Amelia sat across from me, looking like a shadow of the confident woman she used to be. Her lawyer was doing his best to salvage something for her, but there wasn't much he could do. The evidence was overwhelming. The affairs, the lies, the money she'd spent on her secret trips, all of it was laid out in black and white. Amelia tried to make eye contact with me a few times, probably thinking she could talk her way out of this like she always did. But I was done. I didn't say much, just nodded along as my lawyer tore apart every argument her side tried to make. By the end of the meeting, it was clear she was screwed. After the papers were signed, she tried one last time to reach out. Dan, please can we talk? I didn't mean for any of this to happen. We can fix this. You don't have to do this. I didn't even bother looking at her. There's nothing left to talk about, Amelia. You made your choices, and now you're going to live with them. And that was it. I walked out, leaving her there with the wreckage of her life. The divorce was finalized, and I came out on top. Amelia, on the other hand, she had nothing left. No career, no reputation, and no friends. She was completely alone. After the divorce was finalized, I finally felt it, a weight lifting off my chest, like I could finally breathe again. The months of scheming, tracking, planning, and executing my revenge had left me exhausted, but the satisfaction was undeniable. I had walked away with most of our assets, and Amelia? Well, her career was in ruins. The colleagues who once admired her had turned their backs, and her former lover didn't even want to be associated with her. She had nothing left, and I wasn't looking back. But what came next surprised me. It wasn't just the satisfaction of seeing Amelia's life crumble that gave me relief. It was the realization that I could finally close that chapter of my life for good. Amelia had been a toxic weight around my neck for years, but now, with her gone, I could focus on something new, something real. That's when things with Sophie started to shift. What began as a tool in my revenge plan had turned into something much more. Sophie and I had been seeing each other for months, and at first, I'll admit, it was all about getting back at Amelia. But somewhere along the line, it stopped being about her. Sophie became more than just a fling. I found myself looking forward to our time together, not just for the physical stuff, but for the connection we were building. It wasn't immediate, though. After what I'd been through, I wasn't about to throw myself into another relationship blindly. I kept my guard up, and Sophie knew it. She'd asked me about my past, about what I wanted moving forward, and for once, I didn't have all the answers. But I knew one thing. I was tired of revenge. I didn't want to live in the past anymore. I wanted something real, something that wasn't built on lies or manipulation. As the weeks turned into months, Sophie and I grew closer. We talked about our future, about starting fresh. Eventually, we made the decision to move out of the city, to leave behind the mess that had been my life with Amelia. We found a new place, nothing too flashy, but it felt like home. A place where we could start over, without the shadow of my past hanging over us. I even started thinking about opening a business with Sophie. She had always been sharp, business-minded, and together, we had a lot of potential. It wasn't just about building something professionally. It was about building something together. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I wasn't consumed by anger or revenge anymore. I was focused on the future. Meanwhile, Amelia was spiraling. Word had gotten back to me that she'd left the city, trying to start over somewhere new. But her reputation had followed her. Every time she tried to land a new job, her past would catch up with her. No one wanted to hire someone who had been publicly exposed for the kind of betrayal she'd committed. Even her family, who had always supported her, started to distance themselves. They couldn't look past the lies, the affairs, the mess she'd made of her life. A few months after the divorce was finalized, Amelia tried to reach out to me. I don't know what she expected. Maybe she thought I'd be open to some kind of reconciliation, or that I'd feel guilty about what happened to her. But when I saw her name pop up on my phone, I didn't even hesitate. I ignored her call, just like I ignored the dozen messages she left after that. She had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. I didn't know her anything. I heard through the grapevine that she had fallen into depression, that she was struggling to keep her life together, with no job, no friends, and no one to turn to. There was a time when I might have felt bad for her, when I might have considered helping her. But not anymore. Amelia wasn't my problem. Not anymore. One evening, Sophie and I met up with some old friends, people who used to know Amelia, who had seen everything play out. They were shocked by how far I'd come. "You look like a new man," one of them said. "I can't believe how much has changed." And they were right. I wasn't the same man I had been when this whole thing started. I wasn't the bitter, angry guy who was obsessed with revenge. I'd changed, grown. I wasn't defined by what Amelia had done to me anymore. She was a part of my past, but she wasn't going to define my future. As the evening went on, the conversation turned to Amelia, and someone asked me how she was doing. I shrugged. I don't really know. I don't keep up with her anymore. They were surprised, of course. They expected me to care, to have some lingering feelings about her downfall. But I didn't. Amelia's life was her own mess to deal with. I had moved on, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. Sophie and I left that night, hand in hand, walking down a new path together. My life had been torn apart, rebuilt, and transformed. And now, I was ready for whatever came next. Amelia was just a memory, a reminder of who I used to be and how far I'd come.